Hello there. I'm Stuart Harrington and welcome to the Essentials of Algebra 1. This video is a practice video whereby you will have an opportunity to practice on some of the problems that we introduced in the content portion of module number 4. So before we dive into the practice problems, let's take a quick review of what it was that we learned in module 4. The learning targets in Module 4 included identifying x and y intercepts, identifying zeros, and then calculating the slope when you are given 2 points based on that little formula that we've learned previously. So there was some vocabulary tied to that. Obviously, you need to know what the x and y intercepts are. You need to recall what the zero of a function is. Remember, that is another way of saying the x-intercept. The zero is named because it is where the linear function equals 0. So if you can find the x-intercept, you can find the zero. And finally, we talked about what slope was. We gave a definition for it. We talked about how to figure out what the slope was by looking at a graph, and then we talked about how to figure out the slope based on the formula if we were just given 2 points. All right, so let's go ahead and dive right into some problems. So here's a set of lines, then we'll take a little bit of each one of them. If we look first at line number 1, line number 1 is going to be the orange line. What I'd like to know is, can you tell me the y-intercept and the slope of that line? Now we'll use our pause, work, resume, and compare method for working through these problems again today. You will pause the video after we ask the questions. You'll do your work, click the resume button, and then compare how your work looks to the work that we'll have on the screen. So for line number 1, we want you to find 2 things. I want you to find the y-intercept and the slope. Go ahead and hit that pause button now. Do your calculations, hit resume when you're done. See you in a minute. All right, glad you're back. Let's take a look at the y-intercept first of all. You need to remember that your x-axis is the horizontal axis, the y-axis is the vertical axis. So when I look for the y-intercept of a line, I'm looking for where does it cross the y-axis. Well, there's the location right there. And so all we need to do is identify that point. So I'm going to start at the origin and just count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the y-intercept is going to be 6. If they want you to tell the name of the point, then the name of that point is 0, 6. Now, what about the slope of this line? Well, we need to figure out a couple of places on the line where the line crosses at some good crosshair points of the graph. So as I look at this, there are actually quite a few of them. And so any of these points right through here are exactly the kind of point we need. We can pick any of those that we'd like to. So we'll select this one up here. We're going to call that point A. We'll call our y-intercept point B. Now you'll remember that the slope is going to be the change of y divided by the change of x. Now I may not have introduced that little triangle symbol previously. That is a Greek letter delta, which is commonly used in mathematics to represent the effect of change on some quantity. So when you see delta something, that's talking about the change of a particular number or a variable. You'll use that symbol all the way up into calculus if you take that course someday. So taking a look at the change of y versus the change of the x, I'm going to compare the y values first. I'm going to go from point A to point B. So there's point B and there's point A, the level of A. I'm going to start up here and go down 1, 2, 3, 4. So I went down 4. Down is in the negative direction. And so delta y, or the change of y, is down 4, aka negative 4. What about the x value? The x value goes from right here to right here. Now, how far is that? Well, we'll start with the x value of point A, and we'll just count over. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we counted to the right this time. That's a positive value. So negative 4 over 4. Delta y is negative 4. Delta x, positive 4. You can reduce negative 4 over 4 to simply negative 1. And so that is going to be your slope for the orange line. Okay? Now, let's move on to line number 2. Line number 2 is the green line. And for the green line, I want you to identify the x-intercept, the 0, and the slope. 3 things on this line. Line number 2, again, that's the green one, and we want to do the x-intercept, the 0, and the slope. Go. Hit the pause button, do your work. All right, welcome back. Let's take a look at the green line and identify the x-intercept. The x-intercept is where the line crosses the x-axis, and so that's going to be way over here at this point. And so I'm going to simply count from 0, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5. So the x-intercept is going to be negative 5. If you are asked to write the full point, that is going to be the point negative 5, 0. Make sure that you label the point correctly. Remember, the x-coordinate comes in the first slot, the y-coordinate comes in the second slot. If you have difficulty naming points, we need to get that taken care of ASAP. The next question is the 0. What is the 0? Well, that's another reason I wanted to write the name of the point down. Because if you look at the name of this point, negative 5, 0, you see the value of the y is 0. That's what makes negative 5 a 0. I spoke earlier about a 0 and an x-intercept being the same thing. It's different names for the same point. And so the reason we have a different name for it is because sometimes we're wanting just to talk about where is it crossing the axis. Other times we want to know where is the value of the function 0. Well, negative 5, 0 tells us that the value of the function is 0. The value of a function at a particular point is always the y value. The y value tells us what the value of the entire function is at a particular x location. So the 0 is going to be a negative 5. There's not an actual point that's associated with the 0. It's just a value of x equals negative 5. Last question on the green line, we're wanting to discover the slope. And so we'll again look for points that are directly on a crosshair, a good, easy name to select. We're going to let this point be A and this point be B, okay? And we're going to evaluate the change in y. Remember, that's delta y. And then we'll evaluate delta x, the change of x. So let's do the y values first. Our y values on point A are right here, and point B are right here. What is the change from down here to this? Well, that's just 1, 2. And that's 2 up, so that's going to be a positive 2. Delta x is going from right here to right here. So the change of x is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so the change of x is going to be a positive 5, and that means our slope is 2/5. And we would just leave that as a fraction. Next problem I'd like for you to work involves line number 3. Line 3 is the blue line, and I'd like for you to find the y-intercept and the slope of the blue line, line number 3. So hit the pause button, and we'll see you back in a few minutes. Welcome back. Let's take a peek at the answers, the correct way to work these particular problems. Looking at the y-intercept first, again, we're looking for where does this graph, where does the blue line cross the y-axis? That's going to be this guy right here. and we need to identify that point. So we're just going to count down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's -6 on the y-axis. We went down, so that's the negative direction. So the y-intercept is going to be -6. Did you write down the name of the point? Think about that for a second if you didn't. The name of that point is going to be 0, -6. All right, I didn't specify for that, but we've talked about it, so you should be able to answer that question. Now let's address the slope. Let's take a look at the slope. I'm going to look for a point on the blue line that crosses a nice intersection of the lines. I'm going to use this point right here. So I've got that point, and then I've got my y-intercept. And because we're doing slope, we're going to look at the change of y divided by the change of x, delta y over delta x. So let's take a look at the delta y first. Oh, we do need to label our points. We're going to go from point A down here to point B. So from point A is up on this level, and point B is down here at this level. So we're going down. That's going to be negative. How far? 1, 2, 3, 4. Went down 4. So that's going to be a -4 for the delta y. Now to figure out the delta x, going to do kind of the same thing. We're going to start with point A is right here, and B is right here. Going from A to B, so we're going this direction. So that's a positive answer, and that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Delta x is 6. Now if I look at that fraction, -4 over 6, that's a pretty decent slope, but it is a fraction that could reduce. You want to make sure that you reduce those fractions. Both the -4 and the 6 have a common factor of 2. So if I divide the -4 by 2, I'm going to get -2. And 6 divided by 2 is obviously 3. So this would be my final answer of the slope of line 3. All right, let's continue right on. Next line is number 5. Line number 5 is the black line. And we want to find 3 things on this line. I want you to find the y-intercept. I want you to find the 0. And I also want you to find the slope of that friend. Slope, 0, and the y-intercept. Hit the pause button. Let's see how you do on this one. Welcome back. Let's take a look at the answers to this question. First, we were asked to find the y-intercept. Well, where does this line cross the y-axis? Way down here. And so I'm going to do a little bit of counting. So I've got to go way down there to that line. That's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Down. That means -12 is the y-intercept. The point is going to be the point 0, -12. Okay? So there's is your y-intercept. Now, the next thing I asked you to find was the 0. And remember, the definition of the 0 is exactly the same as the definition of the x-intercept. That kind of presents a problem, doesn't it, on this guy? Because if you look, that line number 5, is parallel to the x-axis. It's not going to intersect the x-axis. Consequently, there is no 0. That can happen sometimes in the functions that we work with in mathematics, that there is no 0. Had I asked you for the x-intercept, can't get that either. It doesn't cross the x-axis. So there's not an x-intercept, and there is not going to be a 0 for this one. So we've looked at several graphs now. What I'd like for you to do is take a look at this next question. The next question is going to involve these 3 points. They are not on a graph, and I don't want you to necessarily graph them. I just want you to know that I'm talking about point A is the point 6, -4. Point B is the point 2, 8, and point C is negative 8, 6. That's all I need you to know. I would like for you to find the slope between A and B. Just do that one first. We won't worry about A and C until the second one. Let's do just A and B first. Hit the pause button. Come back when you're ready. Let's see how you did finding the slope between point A and point B. If I had a little bit kinder heart, I should have given you the formula that we need for this. If I didn't give you the formula and you were going, I don't know how to do this, okay, that's a formula you really need to memorize. The slope of a line is going to be equal to the change of y divided by the change of x. We've spoken about that. But what if I don't know what the picture looks like? How do I figure this out? Well, if I asked you for the change between 2 and 5, what would you tell me? You'd tell me 3. If I asked you for the change between 6 and 10, you would tell me 4. If I asked you for the change between -1 and +1, you'd say that's 2. Now, how do we get those numbers? How do we know that? Well, we know that because we know that to find the change between two numbers, we subtract them. So that is the way we figure out the formula for delta y. The change of y is going to be the y value of the second point minus the y value of the first point. Similarly, the delta x is going to be the x value of the second point minus the x value of the first point. That's your slope formula. It's as simple as that. Which one is the second point? Which one is the first point? It doesn't matter. You can say that point A is the first point and point B is the second point. You can do it the other way around. Point B is the first point, point A is the second point. It doesn't matter, just you got to follow the formula once you decide. Let's say that this point right here, point B, is going to be number 2, and point A is going to be point number 1. What is the y value of the second point? Well, here's the second point. The y value is 8. All right, so we're going to put an 8 right here. We've got a minus sign. Now we need the y value of the first point. Well, the y value of the first point is -4. You got to be real careful here. Many people think, oh, I've already got a minus sign. I don't need that -4. Oh, yeah, you do. The formula says y2 minus y1. So we're going to need to put 8 minus -4. That's going to be the change of y. Now let's look at the change of x. What's happening down there? The x value of the second point is 2, and the x value of the first point is 6. So we've got 2 minus 6. Now all we need to do is do the math. If you're struggling with adding and subtracting integers, this could be difficult. I hope you're not. If you are, there are some places on the internet where you can go. If you'll search adding and subtracting integers practice, there will be lots of math sites that you could go to and just drill you on those, because that is a skill that you need to master. I do have a worksheet that I will try to put into this module that can help you drill those if you need some help with that. Let's do the math on this. What's the 8 minus -4? You'll remember that minus a negative is always the same thing as plus positive. And so that's really 8 plus 4, and that's going to be the number 12. And 2 minus 6? 2 minus 6 is going to be -4. And so our answer is 12 over -4, and that can be reduced. 12 divided by -4 is actually a whole number, -3. So -3 is our answer to the slope between A and B. Now think about what that means. If the slope is negative, is the line going up or is it going down? You should know the answer to that. Is it going up or is it going down? The slope is negative, that means it's going down. Let's find the slope between points A and C this time. I've given you a little bit more review instruction. Hopefully you'll be more successful on this one. I kind of was not very kind to you, didn't give you the formula or remind you about it or anything going into that first problem. But now that we've had a conversation about how to find the slope between 2 points, finding the slope between point A and point C should go pretty quickly. Hit pause and we'll see you in a few minutes. Welcome back. Now let's take a look at the slope between points A and C. That's this point up here and this point down here. Again, it doesn't matter which one you select to be the first point and which one you select to be the second point. Now, on the last problem, we took the first point being the top one and the second one being the bottom one. And we're going to flip that this time, just so that you can see it doesn't really matter. This time, point number 2 is going to be up here, and point number 1 will be down there. That's not going to affect our answer. So if my work looks a little bit different than yours, don't panic right away, because you may have selected the reverse in terms of which one's point 1 and which one's point 2. Wait till we get to the final answer, and then you can check to see, because it will be the very same at the end if you worked it correctly. I left the formula here so that it would be available to us. You've got this y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So let's go in and let's plug in some values. What is the y value of the second point? Well, that's -4. -4. What's the y value of the first point? Well, we're going to subtract it, and the y value of the first point is 6. So there's the top of the fraction. What about the denominator, the bottom of the fraction? The x of the second point, that's this one right here, that's the 6, minus the x of the first point, that's going to be -8. Look at there, we're going to have another minus -8. So let's do the math. In the numerator, the top of the fraction, we have -4 minus 6. If it helps you, remember that that means plus -6. -4 plus -6, clearly that's going to be -10. All right. And then what about 6 minus -8? Well, that's going to be plus +8. So that's going to be 14. 6 plus 8 is 14. So we have our slope, -10 over 14, but that can be reduced. That can be reduced, so we're going to do that. Both of those numbers divide by 2. -10 divided by 2 is going to be -5, and 14 divided by 2 is going to be 7. So there is our slope. Our slope is going to be -5 over 7. Again, is this line going up? Is this line going down? It has a negative slope. That means that if you look at the graph and you look what's happening on the right-hand side of that graph, that line is headed downhill. Okay? Negative slopes tell us that. That's the final problem of this practice session. If you did really well on those, awesome. You're probably ready to go on and work through the quiz. If you struggled a little bit, why might that be? Well, mixing up the x and y intercepts can be a thing. Switching up the x and y values when you're finding the slope, if you're struggling using that formula. As I mentioned, frankly, adding and subtracting errors. That can be a situation that's causing you to get the wrong answers as well. The specific definitions, I think, are pretty straightforward. X-intercept, we know what that means. Y-intercept, I should know what that means. The 0 is the same thing as the x-intercept. So I think the concepts are generally pretty well understood by students. But those three things, mixing up the x-intercept and the y-intercept, switching the x and the y values when you're filling in your slope formula, or just making sign errors and not adding and subtracting properly, that could be why you're making these mistakes. Right? So we need to get some help with the addition and subtraction if you need to. If you need a little bit of review on the X and Y intercept, go back and watch the content portion video. Do that again, skip through it. Listen with your ears and your mind. Watch with your eyes and with your mind. And make sure that you are really bringing in all of that information. Okay? Awesome job, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.